Admiral Kira Vance stood alone on the observation deck of Bastion Station, her hands clasped behind her back as she stared into the endless dark of space for 12 years. She had commanded this station at the very edge of human territory, and in all that time nothing had ever threatened the peace of the Orion. Frontier Bastion Station was the last outpost before the unknown, a massive structure of steel and determination that floated in the cold void like a silent guardian. Behind her lay the protected systems of the Galactic Concordat, home to 12 different species who had learned to live together in an uneasy peace. Ahead of her lay nothing but empty space and distant stars that no ship had ever visited. She liked it here, in this quiet corner of the universe, where the greatest danger was usually a stray asteroid or a malfunctioning power relay. But tonight something felt different, and Admiral Vance had learned long ago to trust her instincts. The first alarm came at exactly 3 hours past midnight. Ship time Lieutenant Commander Eli Thorne burst onto the observation deck with panic written across his young face. His uniform wrinkled and his hair uncombed as if he had run straight from his bed. "Admiral, we have contact," he said, his voice cracking with fear. "Multiple signatures incoming from deep void, and they are moving fast." Vance turned slowly, her gray eyes narrowing as she studied her officer. "How many signatures, Lieutenant Commander?" "Over 200 at first count, ma'am. But the number keeps changing as our sensors pick up more," Thorne replied, his hands shaking as he handed her a datapad. "And there is something else. Something that makes no sense at all." Vance looked at the datapad and felt her stomach drop like a stone, because what she saw was impossible. The tactical display showed a massive fleet approaching Bastion Station at incredible speed, red markers swarming across the screen like angry insects. But that was not the strange part. The strange part was that every single information field next to those markers was blank. No ship class, no energy signature match, no origin vector, no species identification, nothing at all. The computer cannot identify them. She asked quietly. "No, ma'am," Thorne said. "I ran the scan 3 times myself, and every database in the Concordat comes back empty. These ships do not match anything we have ever seen before." Vance walked to the main tactical console and pulled up the velocity readings. And what she saw made her blood run cold. The unknown fleet was traveling at 4/10 the speed of light and still accelerating. A feat that should have been physically impossible for any known vessel. At that speed, the inertial forces alone should have crushed every living thing aboard those ships. "Into paste, get Captain Rokan up here immediately," Vance ordered. "I want our Velith liaison to see this with his own eyes." Captain Rokan arrived within minutes, his 4 eyes blinking rapidly as he studied the tactical display with growing horror. The Velith were one of the oldest species in the Concordat, with technology far beyond what humans had achieved. But even he looked confused and afraid. "This is not possible," he whispered, his voice barely audible. "No species in the known galaxy travels at such speeds without deceleration windows. The energy requirements alone would be astronomical, and the structural stress would tear any ship apart. And yet there they are," Vance replied grimly, "coming straight for us." She opened a channel to every station on the deck and spoke with a calm she did not feel. "All hands, this is Admiral Vance. We have unknown contacts approaching at high velocity. This is not a drill. I repeat, this is not a drill. All personnel to battle stations immediately." The station erupted into controlled chaos as crew members ran to their posts. Weapon systems powered up, and shields began to charge. Vance watched the red markers grow closer on the display, counting down the minutes until contact. "Have we attempted communication?" she asked. "Yes, ma'am," Thorne replied. "We have broadcast every known greeting protocol in the Concordat database, including mathematical primes, hydrogen wavelength signals, And universal peace symbols? And their response? Nothing, Admiral. Complete silence. Vance felt a chill run down her spine that had nothing to do with the cold of space in her experience. Enemies who talked could be reasoned with, but enemies who stayed silent wanted only one thing. She turned to face her crew. These brave men and women who had followed her to the edge of known space. And she saw fear in their eyes, but also determination. They were human. And humans did not run from the unknown. Open a channel to Earth Command, she ordered. Priority 1, emergency encryption. The communication officer worked quickly, and within moments the face of Admiral Chun appeared on the main screen, looking tired and confused. Vance? What is happening out there? My board just lit up like a Christmas tree. Sir, we have a frontier breach, Vance reported, her voice steady despite the terror growing in her chest. Unknown hostiles, fleet strength, approaching Bastion Station at impossible velocity. Unknown? What do you mean, unknown? I mean exactly that, sir. No data, no origin, no species match in any database. We do not know who they are or where they came from. Chun's face went pale. How long until contact? Vance glanced at the tactical display. At current velocity, approximately 4 hours, but they show no signs of slowing down. That is insane. They will overshoot you completely at that speed. That is what we thought too, sir, but their trajectory is adjusting constantly. They know exactly where we are, and they are coming straight for us. Chun was silent for a long moment, and Vance could see him processing the impossible situation. I will notify the Concordat Council immediately, he finally said. In the meantime, prepare your defenses and try to establish communication. Maybe they just have not received our signals yet. Understood, sir. The channel closed, and Vance turned back to the observation deck window, out there in the darkness. Something was coming, something that no one had ever seen before. Something that moved too fast and stayed too silent. She did not know what it wanted, but she knew one thing for certain. Whatever happened next, Bastion Station would stand its ground, because that was what humans did. They stood their ground. Even when they were afraid, even when they faced the impossible, even when the entire universe seemed to be turning against them. Admiral Kira Vance straightened her uniform and prepared for the longest night of her life. The frontier had been breached, and nothing would ever be the same again. 48 hours after the first alarm, the Galactic Concordat Council gathered an emergency session aboard the massive space station called Unity Prime 12. Species sat around a curved table that floated in the center of a great hall. Their representatives, watching each other with nervous eyes as holographic displays showed the unknown fleet still approaching. Bastion Station Ambassador Thissa Oren represented humanity at this gathering. A tall woman with silver-streaked hair and sharp brown eyes that missed nothing. She sat among creatures that looked nothing like her. Beings that had traveled the stars for thousands of years before. Humans had even learned to make fire. To her left sat the Velith delegation, their four-eyed faces showing deep concern as they whispered among themselves in their clicking language. To her right were the Kethmari, insectoid creatures with gleaming black shells and mandibles that never stopped moving. Across the table floated the Ori, beings made of living crystal that pulsed with inner light, and beside them sat the gentle Drenari, whose soft blue skin and kind eyes hid a fierce intelligence. The High Arbiter Sylvine called the meeting to order, their luminescent body flickering like a dying star. We have gathered to discuss the crisis at the Orion frontier, Sylvine announced, their voice echoing through the hall. Our analysts have studied the approaching fleet for 2 days now, and we have found nothing to explain their origin. Nothing? Asked the Kethmari delegate, their mandibles clicking with irritation. How can there be nothing? We have 30,000 years of records in our databases. covering every species that has ever traveled between the stars. And yet these vessels match none of them, Sylvain replied. They appear to have emerged from the void terminus, a region of space so hostile that no probe has ever returned from its depths. A murmur of fear rippled through the assembly, because every species present knew the stories about the void terminus. It was a place of darkness and death, a corner of the galaxy where stars did not shine and life could not survive. The fleet has begun to slow, reported a Velith scientist, pulling up new data on the central display. They are taking positions around Bastion Station, surrounding it on all sides. Then we still have time to negotiate, said the Drenari delegate hopefully. Perhaps they are simply trying to communicate in a way we do not understand. Perhaps if we try harder to reach out to them. We have tried everything, interrupted Admiral Vance's voice as her holographic image flickered to life at the end of the table. Mathematical primes, hydrogen wavelength signals, visual patterns, sound broadcasts, even simple light pulses. They do not respond to anything. Ambassador Orin studied the Admiral's face and saw exhaustion written in every line. Vance had not slept in 2 days, staying at her post while the unknown fleet drew closer and closer. What do you recommend, Admiral? Orin asked. I recommend we prepare for the worst, Vance replied grimly. These ships are not here to talk. I can feel it in my bones. They are here for something else entirely. High Arbiter Sylvain raised one glowing appendage for silence. The Council has discussed this matter at length, and we have reached a preliminary decision. Orin felt her stomach tighten, because she already knew what was coming. We recommend immediate evacuation of the Orion frontier, Sylvain announced. All personnel should withdraw to the inner systems, where our combined fleets can establish a proper defense line. You mean retreat, Vance said flatly. We mean survival, the Arbiter replied. These unknown vessels possess technology beyond anything we have encountered. Engaging them directly would be foolish. And what happens when they follow us? Orin asked, rising from her seat to address the Council. What happens when they pursue us to the inner systems, and then to the core worlds, and then to our home planets? We will have time to prepare, said the Kethmari delegate. Time to study them and find their weaknesses, or time to watch them destroy everything we have built. Orin countered, her voice rising with passion. Running away tells them one thing and one thing only, that we are prey to be hunted. The Drenari delegates shook their heads sadly. Ambassador, we understand your concerns, but surely you must see the wisdom and caution. These beings are completely unknown to us, and that is exactly why we cannot run. Orin replied, For 30,000 years, the species of this Concordat have explored the galaxy together. You have mapped every star and cataloged every world. But somewhere along the way, you stopped pushing forward. You became comfortable with what you knew, and stopped asking what else might be out there. She looked around the table at faces both alien and afraid. Humanity has only been among the stars for 300 years. She continued, We are the youngest species in this room by far. But we have learned one thing in our short history. The unknown does not go away. Just because you run from it, then what would you propose? Sylvain asked, their light flickering with curiosity. I propose we find out what they are, Orin said firmly. I propose we send our best scientists to study them, our best soldiers to fight them if necessary, and our best diplomats to speak with them if they ever decide to answer. And if they attack? The Kethmari delegate demanded Admiral Vance's hologram stepped forward, her eyes blazing with determination. Then we make them regret it. The council chamber fell silent as the weight of her words settled over the assembly. For a long moment, no one spoke, and Orin could see the fear in their eyes warring with something else. Something that looked almost like hope finally. The Velith delegate rose from his seat, his 4 eyes fixed on Orin with new respect. The humans speak with courage that we have perhaps forgotten, he said slowly. My people were warriors once, before we learned the ways of peace. Perhaps it is time to remember those old lessons. One by one, other delegates began to nod, their fear slowly transforming into resolve. High Arbiter Sylvine watched the shifting mood of the council with ancient eyes that had seen empires rise and fall. Very well, they announced at last. We will not retreat. Instead, we will reinforce Bastion Station with ships from every member species. We will face this unknown enemy together. As a united Concordat, Orin felt a surge of pride as she looked at Admiral Vance's hologram. Seeing the same determination reflected in the older woman's eyes, they did not know what was coming, and they did not know if they could survive it, but they would stand together, human and alien alike, and face whatever emerged from the darkness, because sometimes the only way forward was through, and humanity had never been afraid of the dark. The attack came without warning on the Yao. 5th day after first contact, Admiral Vance was reviewing tactical reports in her command center when a single vessel broke away from the eye. Unknown fleet and accelerated toward Bastion Station at terrifying speed. Admiral, we have incoming. Lieutenant Commander Thorne shouted, his fingers flying across his console. One ship, moving fast. It is not responding to our warning signals. Point defense, open fire. Vance ordered immediately. The station's weapon systems came alive in an instant, sending streams of bright energy lancing toward the approaching vessel. And Vance watched as bolt after bolt struck the enemy ship and tore chunks from its strange hull. But the ship did not slow down, and it did not try to evade. It simply kept coming, absorbing damage that would have destroyed any normal vessel, its broken hull trailing fire and debris as it plunged toward the station like a falling star. It is not stopping. Thorne screamed, brace for impact. The collision was like nothing Vance had ever experienced. A thunderous explosion that shook the entire station and sent crew members flying through the air like leaves in a storm. She grabbed onto her console and held on as the deck beneath her buckled and groaned. Alarms screaming from every direction. When the shaking finally stopped, she pulled herself upright and looked at the damage reports flooding her screen. Section 12 was gone, completely destroyed by the impact, and with it 300 crew members who had been stationed there. Seal the breach, she ordered, coughing through the smoke that filled the command center. Get emergency teams to all adjacent sections now. But even as her crew rushed to contain the damage, new alarms began to sound, and Thorne's voice cut through the chaos with words that chilled her to the bone. Admiral, we have boarders. Unknown entities are emerging from the wreckage and moving into the station. Vance pulled up the internal security feeds and saw something that would haunt her dreams for the rest of her life. Shapes were crawling out of the destroyed enemy ship. Shapes that looked neither fully mechanical nor fully alive. Twisting forms that seemed to bend light around them and moved in stuttering jerks like broken images on a screen. They poured into the station's corridors like a flood of nightmares. And wherever they went, screams followed. Corporal Yuki Tanaka was leading a rescue team through Corridor 9 when she encountered the first wave of invaders. She had been in the military for 10 years and had seen her share of combat. But nothing had prepared her for the creatures that came around the corner toward her squad. They were tall and thin, with too many limbs and heads that had no faces. Their bodies covered in something that looked like black, glass mixed with living flesh. One of her soldiers screamed and started to run, but Tanaka grabbed him by the collar and pulled him back. Nobody runs, she shouted, raising her pulse rifle and taking aim. We are soldiers of Earth, and we do not run from anything. She pulled the trigger and sent a burst of energy straight into the chest of the leading creature. And to her amazement, it fell. The thing let out a shriek that seemed to come from everywhere at once, a sound that rattled her bones and made her teeth ache. and then it collapsed to the deck and stopped moving. They can die. Tanaka yelled into her communicator, broadcasting to every soldier on the station. The enemy can be killed. Conventional weapons are effective. Fight back. Her words spread through the station like wildfire. And suddenly, the tide of the battle began to turn in Corridor 7. A group of engineers used plasma cutters, meant for hull repairs, to create a wall of fire that no enemy could cross in the medical bay. Dr. Sarah Chun organized her staff into a defensive line, using surgical lasers to cut down any creature that came through the doors in the station's galley. A cook named Miguel Hernandez found himself alone against a dozen of the invaders, armed with nothing but a maintenance laser and pure stubborn rage. He held that choke point for 11 minutes, screaming curses in Spanish as he burned down enemy after enemy, refusing to give even a single step of ground. When reinforcements finally arrived, they found him still standing, surrounded by the bodies of his enemies. The maintenance laser melted to slag in his burned hands. "Are you all right?" the squad leader asked in amazement. Hernandez just grinned through the pain and said, "They picked the wrong station to attack." On the command deck, Admiral Vance coordinated the defense with blood streaming from a gash on her forehead. Ignoring the medic who kept trying to treat her wound, Captain Ro Khan was dead, killed in the initial impact. But his sacrifice had not been in vain. The Velith officer had been the one to sound the first alarm, giving precious seconds of warning that had saved hundreds of lives. "All Concordat vessels, this is Bastion Actual." Vance broadcast on every frequency, her voice steady and strong despite the chaos around her. "The enemy can be killed with conventional weapons. I repeat, they are vulnerable to our weapons. All ships are authorized to engage at will." For a long moment, there was only silence from the fleet of allied ships that had gathered around the station over the past few days. Then a single Velith cruiser broke formation and opened fire on the unknown fleet, its weapons blazing with righteous fury. Within seconds, other ships began to follow. Kefmari warships and Drenari medical frigates, and even the crystalline vessels of the Ori, all of them joining the fight against the invaders who had dared to attack. The battle for Bastion Station had begun in earnest in the corridors of the station. Corporal Tanaka led her squad deeper into enemy-held territory. Learning the creature's weaknesses with every encounter, they froze for just a moment when exposed to ultraviolet light. Giving soldiers precious seconds to take aim and fire, they became confused when hit with coordinated sonic bursts, stumbling and crashing into each other like drunk animals. Every death taught the humans something new. Every retreat became a chance to gather information. And slowly but surely, the defenders began to push back against the tide of invaders. Tanaka did not know if they would survive the night, but she knew one thing for certain. Humanity would not go quietly into the dark. They would fight with everything they had, and they would make the enemy pay for every inch of ground in blood and fire. The creatures had made a terrible mistake. When they chose to attack Bastion Station, they had awakened something ancient and fierce, something that had been fighting against impossible odds since the first human picked up a rock to defend their family. They had awakened the human will to survive, and that was something no enemy had ever been able to defeat. The battle for Bastion Station lasted 19 hours, and every single one of those hours was filled with blood and fire and desperate courage. By the 6th hour, the Concordat fleet had engaged the unknown Armada in full force. Thousands of ships trading fire across the dark void, while soldiers fought and died in the corridors of the station below. The enemy proved to be stronger than anyone had expected, their vessels regenerating damage at impossible speeds, their boarding creatures seeming to multiply no matter how many were killed. But the defenders had something that the enemy had not anticipated, and that something was the human capacity to learn and adapt Lieutenant Commander Eli Thorne, led a strike team of 30 volunteers into the heart of one of the enemy vessels that had attached itself to the stations. Hull it was a suicide mission by any reasonable measure, a desperate attempt to find some weakness that could turn the tide of battle. Interior of the alien ship was like nothing Thorne had ever seen. Walls that seemed to breathe and pulse with sickly light, corridors that twisted and curved in ways that made no sense. His team fought through chamber after chamber, losing soldiers with every step, until finally they reached what appeared to be the vessel's core there, surrounded by his engineers. Thorne made a discovery that would change everything. "Look at this," whispered Private Chun, pointing her scanner at a pulsing node on the wall. "The whole ship is vibrating at a specific electromagnetic frequency, like it is humming a song we cannot hear." Thorne studied the readings and felt a spark of hope ignite in his chest. "If the ship is tuned to a specific frequency," he said slowly, "then maybe we can disrupt it with a different one." Working frantically while enemy creatures clawed at the barricades his soldiers had erected, the engineers calculated the exact counter-frequency needed to interfere with the alien technology. Thorne broadcast their findings to the fleet, and within minutes every human vessel was equipped with hastily modified transmitters. When the first wave of electromagnetic static hit the enemy fleet, the results were immediate and dramatic. Enemy ships that had been relentlessly pursuing Concordat vessels suddenly slowed and drifted, their regeneration halting and their weapons falling silent aboard Bastion Station. The boarding creatures stumbled and fell, their movements becoming jerky and uncoordinated as the static interfered with whatever force controlled them. "It is working," Admiral Vance shouted from the command deck, watching as the tide of battle finally began to turn. All ships maintained the broadcast and pressed the attack. The Concordat fleet surged forward with renewed hope, their weapons tearing into the weakened enemy vessels, while the static kept them from healing. But the battle was far from over, and the enemy still had numbers on their side. That was when Corporal Tanaka made her own contribution to the war effort, fighting through the lower levels of the station with what remained of her squad. She had been gathering information about the enemy creatures with every encounter, noting their reactions to different stimuli and cataloging their weaknesses. Now she broadcast her findings to every soldier on the station, sharing tactics that had been paid for in blood. "Ultraviolet light freezes them for 3 to 4 seconds, she reported. "Concentrated sonic bursts at high frequency disrupt their movement patterns. They communicate through some kind of shared signal, so if you can isolate one from the group, it becomes confused and easier to kill." Her information spread through the ranks like a gift from heaven, and suddenly soldiers, who had been barely holding the line, began to push back against the invaders in Corridor 12. A squad of Marines set up ultraviolet floodlights at a choke point and used the precious seconds of paralysis to cut down wave after wave of attackers. The engineering section. A team of technicians rigged the station's speakers to emit the disruptive frequency Tanaka had identified, clearing entire sections of enemies in a matter of minutes. And when the Velith finally joined the ground battle, their natural ability to see in multiple spectrums allowed them to spot the creatures even when they tried to hide in the shadows. Captain Rokan's cousin, a warrior named Velthin, led a Velith battle group with human tactical advisors at his side, combining alien firepower with human cunning to devastating effect. The crystalline Ori, who had not participated in a ground war for 3,000 years, since their harmonic weapons with human targeting systems and used focused sound waves to shatter entire groups of enemies. Even the peaceful Drenari contributed, their medical ships diving into the most dangerous zones to rescue the wounded from every species, their healers working side by side with human doctors to save lives that would otherwise have been lost. Hour by hour, the battle shifted in favor of the defenders. By hour 12, the enemy boarding forces had been pushed back to the sections they had first invaded. By hour 15, The Concordat fleet had destroyed over half of the unknown armada by hour 18. The enemy vessels began to retreat, pulling back from the station and regrouping in the distance. And by hour 19, they were gone. The unknown fleet accelerated away from Bastion Station at the same impossible speed with which they had arrived, vanishing back toward the void terminus. Like a nightmare fading at dawn, Admiral Vance stood in the ruins of her command deck, surrounded by exhaustion and grief and the bodies of the fallen, and watched the red markers disappear from her tactical display. Lieutenant Commander Thorne limped to her side, his uniform torn and bloody, one arm hanging useless in a makeshift sling. "We did it," he said quietly, his voice hoarse from hours of shouting orders. "We actually did it." Vance shook her head slowly, her eyes never leaving the stars. "We survived the first battle, Commander, but this is not over. They will be back." "How do you know?" "Because we hurt them," she replied. "We showed them that we can fight back, that we are not easy prey. And something tells me that they are not used to being hurt." She turned to face him, and despite the exhaustion carved into every line of her face, there was fire in her eyes. "When they come back, we will be ready," she said. "We will study everything we learned today and find new weaknesses. We will build new weapons and train new soldiers. And next time, we will not just survive. What will we do?" Thorne asked. Admiral Vance looked out at the stars one more time, at the distant darkness where the enemy had fled, and allowed herself a small, fierce smile. "Next time, we will make them wish they had never found us." 1 month after the Battle of Bastion Station, the Galactic Concordat Council gathered once more aboard Unity Prime. The mood in the Great Hall was different now, changed in ways both subtle and profound by the events that had shaken the galaxy to its core. When Ambassador Thissa Orin walked to her seat among the delegations, she noticed that the other species looked at her differently than before. There was no more condescension in their eyes, no more polite tolerance for the young and reckless humans who had joined their ancient alliance. Now there was respect, and perhaps just a little bit of fear. High Arbiter Sylvine called the assembly to order, their luminescent form burning brighter than Orin had ever seen. "We have gathered to discuss the aftermath of the frontier breach," the Arbiter announced, "and to determine the path forward for our Concordat." The holographic display at the center of the room came to life, showing the rebuilt sections of Bastion Station and a fleet of ships now permanently stationed in the Orion frontier. "First, let us acknowledge what happened," Sylvine continued. "An unknown enemy emerged from the void terminus and attacked our outermost outpost. They were faster than anything we had ever seen, silent in the face of all our attempts at communication, and possessed of technology that defied our understanding." The Arbiter paused, their light flickering with what might have been emotion. "And yet we survived. Not through retreat or surrender, but through courage and cooperation. Every species in this room contributed to the victory, and every species lost brave souls in the fighting." A moment of silence fell over the assembly, honoring the dead from all worlds who had given their lives at Bastion Station. Then the Kethmari delegate rose from their seat, their mandibles clicking in the formal pattern that indicated great seriousness. "Our scientists have analyzed the remains recovered from the enemy vessels and the creatures that boarded the station," they reported. "What we have found is deeply troubling." The display changed to show images of the twisted wreckage and the strange bodies that had been collected after the battle. "These beings are old," the delegate continued, "far older than any species in this room, older perhaps than our most ancient records. Our best estimate is that they have existed for at least 100,000 years, and possibly much longer." A murmur of shock rippled through the assembly, because the implications of that statement were staggering. Where did they come from? Asked the Drenari delegate, their soft voice trembling slightly. "The void terminus. replied the Kethmari, a region of space we believed was empty and lifeless. Clearly, we were wrong. Something has been living there all this time, waiting in the darkness. Waiting for what? Orin asked, though she suspected she already knew the answer. Admiral Vance's holographic image appeared at the end of the table, her face bearing new scars from the battle, but her eyes still burning with determination. Waiting for someone to find them, Vance said. Or maybe waiting until we were worth finding. The words hung in the air like a challenge. And Orin saw the other delegates shifting uncomfortably in their seats. The Velith representative, Velthin, spoke next, his 4 eyes fixed on the human admiral with open admiration. "We must address what happened during the battle," he said. "When the enemy attacked, many of us hesitated. We wanted to retreat, to hide, to hope that the threat would pass us by." He paused and looked around the table, but the humans did not hesitate. They stood their ground when we faltered, and they found the weaknesses that allowed us to win. Without their courage and creativity, we would all be dead. "You give us too much credit," Orin replied diplomatically. "The Velith fought beside us every step of the way, and the Ori and Drenari and all the others contributed just as much to the victory." "Perhaps," Velthin acknowledged, "but it was humanity that led the way, and it is humanity that has shown us something we had forgotten." "What is that?" asked Sylvine. "That the unknown is not something to run from," Velthin replied. "That fear is not a reason to hide, and that sometimes the only way forward is through the darkness itself." Ambassador Orin stood slowly and addressed the council with words she had been preparing for weeks. 30,000 years ago, the species of this concordat began exploring the galaxy, she said. "You mapped every star and cataloged every world, and you built a civilization that has survived wars and plagues and disasters of every kind." She looked around the table at faces both alien and attentive, but somewhere along the way, you stopped pushing forward. You became comfortable with what you knew and stopped asking what else might be out there. The frontiers of space became borders instead of invitations. She smiled, the same thin and hard expression that had unsettled diplomats for centuries. Humanity has only been among the stars for 300 years, and already we have knocked on a door that no one else dared to approach. We found something in the void terminus, and yes, it was terrifying. But we also survived it, and now that something knows we are here, the Kethmari delegate pointed out. Yes, Orin agreed. They know we are here, and they know that we fight back. They know that we do not surrender, that we do not give up, and that we will never stop looking for answers. She turned to face Vance's hologram directly. "Admiral, what is the current status of Bastion Station?" Vance straightened with pride as she replied, "The station has been rebuilt and reinforced. We have 3 times the ships we had before the attack, and every one of them is equipped with the counter-frequency technology that proves so effective in battle. We are ready for whatever comes next." High Arbiter Sylvine absorbed all of this with ancient wisdom, their form pulsing with thought. "Then the question before us is simple," the Arbiter said. "Do we retreat to the inner systems and hope that the enemy never returns? Or do we move forward into the unknown and find out who they are and what they want?" The vote was unanimous, every species choosing to stand together and face the darkness rather than hide from it. And when the session ended and the delegates returned to their worlds, Ambassador Orin remained behind for a moment, staring at the stars through the great windows of Unity Prime, somewhere out there in the emptiness between galaxies. An ancient enemy was watching and waiting. They had tasted human determination for the first time, and they had learned that this young species would not be easy prey. Orin did not know what the future would bring. But she knew one thing with absolute certainty. When the enemy returned, humanity would be ready, and they would show them what it truly meant to challenge the children of Earth, because humanity had never been afraid of the dark, and they never would be. They were explorers and fighters and dreamers. And the stars themselves would tremble before they gave up. This was not the end of the story. It was only the beginning.